Hi, this is George Alger, and welcome to today's segment of Our Ventura TV. Today we're going to be talking about a false narrative of Chumash history. And our guest expert is Tharon Weighill, or Dr. Tharon Weighill, who is the author of The Indian on the Moon. Welcome, Dr. Weighill, and
Hello.
tell us a little about yourself.
Well, my name is Tharon Weighill, and I'm a member of the Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation. I am the ceremonial director for the Swordfish Clan. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD, and I'm someone who's been active and raised in the American Indian movement since Alcatraz and Standing Rock. I've had a rich, beautiful life.
Very good. And you want to tell us a little bit about your book?
Yes, my book, The Indian on the Moon, is in part some of my PhD dissertation. It's a story. I don't know if you can see it. I don't have my glasses quite on, but the text is really a voice of our own historical production so that people can read the experiences that we live in today, not something that was written by a bunch of anthropologists from a fictive space that they think they figured out about how we lived before our lands were invaded by Spain.
Okay, now that's a good segue into this false narrative of the Chumash, because there is, historical markers around Ventura and elsewhere, and I think the purpose is to honor the Chumash. But tell us about what's the false narrative here.
Well, the false narrative is that there was never a tribe here called the Chumash ever. It's a Hebrew word that means five, which refers to the books of Moses. It came to us in 1891 by a guy named Stephen Powers on a boat trip to the islands, where he says he asked an Indian of an unknown origin what the name of the people were called on the mainland. And he said that the Indian replied that they were called Chumash. And when he asked him what that meant, he said the maker of bead money. But you can't confabulate any of the words and in the language that we have left to make that claim. So that's one of the misnomers. Fernando Librado and I have a book called Eye of the Flute, I believe it is in there. And one of the footnotes, Fernando Librado Quetzalcoatl was born in Mission Santa Buenaventura, and he was interviewed by J.P. Harrington. In there, he said there was a time when there was no Chumash on their land. Okay, so clearly this is a political construction that has a purpose. The purpose is always elusive, but mostly it's to disempower the living descendants of the land. So they tried to create this fictive narrative that says there were all these villages and the people were sedentary here, and that they were from this village, and this is what a nation state identity. There was never any of that in up and down the coast of California, from what is now currently La Paz, Mexico, which was Guaypuri area, all the way up to Huchol, the village of San Francisco. All of these places, there was no national identity. There was never any political oneness or philosophical oneness. There wasn't any of that. Chumashia was invented for the sole purpose of the Settlement Act, to control and own the land. When in 1850, when the United States took control over California from Mexico, they didn't buy it under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. They bought the right of entry to negotiate the sale of it from the Aboriginal people. That's us. So if you can't find them, then you get the land. So that's what led to the extermination policies that were implemented on us. The genocide that we survived was because of that. When they couldn't get rid of us, they created these settlement acts that sought out to purchase the land from the Aboriginal people. But the Aboriginal expression here was so eclectic that they couldn't make heads or tails of it. So they created a simulacra of parliamentary procedure in the United States government, and creating a head of state where there was none, and identified that person so that they could negotiate sales of the land. That's what has gone down here. The invention of Chumashia has given a false sense that there were tribe nation states here that were invaded and all of this stuff that comes with this history that we've attached to the Central Plains area and the trajectory of America across from sea to shining sea, but that's genuinely not what the case was. The case was that there was no nation state here. So the anthropologists, the Museum of Natural History, the university, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Washington, D.C., all work in tandem to continue the oppression of our folks here in this modern time. They invented San Ynez for many reasons. There's only one federally recognized branch of our people. That doesn't mean that they're the only people of us that exist. That's a political policy. That's a political policy of containment by, through many reasons, means, many strategies get, or sub-strategies get implemented by the existence of San Ynez. Like I said earlier, when we were having a conversation, I have family born everywhere from Mission San Gertrudis in La Paz to San Francisco, Mission San Dolores. What was here before was never any of what people think was here before. I spent the last 30 years of my adult life, literally since the time I was 20 years old, trying to figure out why this was this way. What were we called? Who were we? How did we identify? Every time I'd find a space that it would immediately get cut off by other evidence that would say, oh no, that was this. And in the end, what it comes down to was what my grandmother, Lizzie Guevara, told me. Mijo, there was a time when there was no Chumash on this land, but we were always here. And that's
very good.
That to me simplified everything, right?
Now, Dr. Weighill, in contemporary Chumash culture, how well is this knowledge propagated? How many people are aware of this?
Not many, because there were so many strategies of survival implemented during the 1850s to like the 1980s, where our folks had to become everything but be an Aboriginal people to the land. So then during the 1970s, when AIM, the American Indian movement, first started moving across the land, an elder named Grandpa Frank Aaron's Fool's Crow and Grandpa Henry Crow Dog were told Russell Means and Dennis Banks, Vernon Belcourt, Clyde Belcourt, and Bill Means to take this sacred way of life that the Lakota had preserved and take us to the people who had the genocide the worst, and that this sacred way would wake up their spirits. So that's what happened, and a pan-Indian movement hits our lands across the country, Indian country, in the 1970s. That pan-Indian movement ends up waking up this need amongst the people here to say, where are these people that are from this land? An great elder friend of mine, Clay Singer, who was a white anthropologist out of San Luis Obispo. I put the thing white in there so that people can recognize, I don't feel that way. So anyway, he was an anthropologist who said, hey, where are these people? And he began to look for the descendants of the J.P. Harrington notes. Of course, bear in mind, less than 1% of the Aboriginal populations of the land ended up in the mission, but they used the mission doctrine and the mission records to say this person is that and that. Less than 1%. That means 99.9% of the rest of us were in the mountains hiding out. All of this is part of the false narrative that the Museum of Natural History in Santa Barbara and the Bureau of Indian Affairs that supports them, all of this falsity about the human genome and DNA, all of this is all complete hogwash, but people expect that the empirical language and empirical discourse is giving them truth, when in fact it's genuinely leading everybody astray that way, rather than really uncovering what was here. What was here was a culture that had no political definitions that we as modern Americans could ascribe to it.
Wow.
I call it Shumashia.
Thank
That's
you.
my way of laughing.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We've run out of time. I really appreciate you sharing all this info with me. And there's your book. All right. The Indian on the Moon. All right. So we're going to wrap things up here. This is George Alger signing off for this segment of Our Ventura TV. Until we meet again.